the core of my heart because so many my connections and I was waiting for you for your session. And thank you so much for giving us the time.
Maria, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. I appreciated all the energy that you brought to introducing yourself.
Thank you, Ken Beck. It's really a big honor for me, for my connection, for my people and my country that I'm talking live to the Ken Beck. And thank you so much again for your time. So I have the few questions that my connections had to ask from you, to learn from you. So my first question would be that Ken Beck is a big name in the world. So everyone is in my connections is talking about the Kent. So everyone is eager to talk. So I wanted to ask what made Kent? Like, how can someone become Kent Beck, who has done so much for the IT world? And how can someone make their child a Kent Beck? My first and foremost question is this.
Okay, so I think I understand the question. First, my children call me micro famous. So
Micro famous.
I'm famous among a very small number of people in the whole wide world. So I try and keep that in perspective. Um, uh, how do you become a Kent Beck? Well, first your parents have to name you Kent. So
Right.
that's already not going to happen. I think like I understand the direction of the question, but
Yes.
I'm gonna push back on it a little bit. Yeah, you want to. Oscar Wilde said, "Be yourself. Everyone else is taken." And so I'm more interested in the question of how can you be all of you, and how can everybody be all of them? Because I'm a musician and I'm an artist and I do a lot of different things, and other people are going to have different sets of skills, and the challenge of life is just being all of who you are. So uh, as far as I have 5 kids, so
That's good.
I do have some experience bringing them up. Only one of them is in programming. Um, I didn't. I encouraged my kids to do what was really interesting to them, as opposed to trying to
Exactly.
project onto them, oh, I want
Exactly.
you to be just like me. And in fact, they they all have. I have a high-end bartender, a physical therapist, a mechanical engineer, a programmer, and a scientist. So the the best you can do is
That's good. That's really
tell your
nice.
kids that you love them and read them lots of stories. And when they want to do slightly dangerous things with chemicals, let them.
Like, do you grow up in Silicon Valley
Yeah. So
or
I grew up in
something?
Silicon
Your
Valley.
father
I
was your
was,
inspiration, as your father is an engineer himself.
yes. So I was born in Sunnyvale, heart of Silicon Valley in 1961. This is a very long time ago. I'll let you do the math. Um, and my dad was an engineer, started out as an electrical engineer, and then when microprocessors came out, he had done a bunch of programming, but when microprocessors came out, we put together our first hobby computer, soldered it together, and started programming. So I got started very,
Right.
very early,
Right.
which is a super piece of luck on my part. Um, Accomplishing something requires luck, timing, and skill. And the timing was being a kid with at that moment when processing suddenly became cheaper. The luck part was being born into my family. There was some good luck and some bad luck about that, but that's okay. Um, and then the skill part is that I was very much wired to be interested in geeky pursuits. I remember reading microprocessor instruction set manuals as a kid. I'd walk along the street and I'd just be reading Okay, the XOR instruction has this bit pattern, and then blah, 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 blah. And I was just fascinated by that stuff. So it was a combination. Your picture just disappeared for me.
Oh, I think there was some connection issue.
Okay,
Am I
now
audible?
you're.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I hear you now.
All right. I think there was some connectivity issue, so your voice was really dropping. So
Okay, did you miss my answer to your
that's
question?
nice to hear about your background.
Okay, go ahead.
No, 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 no. I was listening to it. Yes.
Okay.
So, Kent, my second most important questions from you is when we work in a very complex environment with tight deadlines and there are high stress levels, waiting for TDD or tests to complete can be a challenging in these kind of environments where clients wants everything on just blink of eye. So what are your views about it? What are your thoughts on balancing the initial investment in writing these tests with the long term benefits of test driven development?
So the first part of the answer is to acknowledge that time has different value at different in different situations.
Hello.
So yes, hello. Your video is frozen for me.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
I'm really sorry. There was some connectivity issue. I'll be starting it again.
No problem.
Okay, Kent, I was asking that when we work in a complex environment with tight deadlines and there are high stress levels, so waiting for test-driven development or tests to complete can be challenging for sometimes for some clients. So what are your views about it? What are your thoughts on balancing the initial investment in writing tests with the long-term benefits of test-driven development, where the
So
client
the
wants everything in a blink of eye?
for sure, everybody wants everything right now, and we also know that that's not possible. So if we
Exactly.
don't deliver everything instantaneously, that it's not a
Yes,
reflection on our skills.
exactly.
It's just not possible. So in extreme programming, that's the question is not what do you want and what's the priority. The question is what do you want to see next?
Exactly.
And it's an important question. The second thing I do is remind myself time doesn't have the same value in all situations. If there's going to be a demo in 15 minutes and you say, "Oh, but I need to write a
Yes.
test first," you're
Yes. Yes.
that that makes no sense.
Yes.
But if you're working on a feature and it's going to take you months and somebody says, "Well, but it has to be done in 2 months instead of 3 months," there's no reason not to test. 3 months is or 2 months is forever. The feedback that you get from tests is going to be so valuable in that time period. It'll pay for itself many times over. Um, so that's part of my thinking in that situation. Um, I also, so I'm in the middle of writing a 3-book series on software design.
Very nice.
The first book is out. It's called Tidy First, and part
Yes, I
of
have
what
it.
oh good.
Thank you.
Part of part of the purpose of design is to create testable elements. So
Exactly.
some people say, well, I can't write tests because the interface to this thing is so complicated and the context in which it operates is so complicated. It's like, well, that's not the only way to design that code. You can
Exactly.
design the code in such a way that most of it is testable, which is way better than
Exactly.
none of it being testable.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it might be a different design than you would do if you weren't thinking about testability, but okay, boo-hoo, life's a set of trade-offs, and this is one of the trade-offs that we all have to deal with.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you very much. So this was the question that somebody asked me to include it. What do you think there are some of the best companies in the whole world with respect to this agile practices or transformation? Because everyone claims that he's agile, everyone, but they are not actually agile. So, what are the some major examples as a company that claim to be agile and are truly agile?
Well, I'll give you the self-serving answer first, which is my company, Mechanical Orchard, where I'm a chief scientist, and I've been there for a year and a half. The engineering team is just stunningly good. They have everybody has 10 plus years of operating in this very iterative, high feedback,
Very
high
nice, very nice, very nice,
sociability style.
very
So
nice,
I think we do a great job. I think ThoughtWorks does a good job for a larger company. Um, and then there are little pockets. People will say, well, I work on this 6-person team in Boise, Idaho, which is in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And yeah, we test and we refactor and we just don't have bugs in production. And I don't know why everybody doesn't work this way. So I think there are a lot of people working in that style, just not making a lot of noise about it.
very nice. So good, so great to hear about this. So, Ken, do you think that agile is more difficult to implement in certain societies or in certain culture versus others?
So are you talking about business cultures or national cultures?
I'm talking about business culture.
So absolutely. The way your company develops software is a reflection of the current power structure. So
Exactly,
if engineers have lower status and say finance has higher status, and the engineers
exactly.
say it's going to take 6 months, and finance says you have 3 months or else,
Yes,
and the engineers say,
yes.
oh yes, it,
Huh,
that's
they're
the
not
kind of
aligned.
development you're going to get, the kind of development culture that
Exactly,
that people use to protect themselves in that kind of a situation. So
exactly.
um, absolutely, it's difficult. Now, sometimes the engineers have higher status, and say sales has lower status, and then you say, no, we're not going to do that. You forget about it, and so you're
Exactly,
going to get a different set of dysfunctions in that environment. The healthy environment is
exactly,
a balance of power between, and a lot of information flowing back and forth and back and forth. And that's the environment in which you can actually do a good job of engineering and
exactly,
deliver the most value. But people are
exactly.
uncomfortable with that. We started out as monkeys, and we're looking for hierarchy and who has more status and who has less status. So it's difficult to maintain, but it's magic when it happens.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you very much for the answer. Okay, Ken, most of my connections message me on LinkedIn and ask me how to select the best architecture for a project. So, what factor when you have a project, you have this specification. So, how to select the best architecture for a project? What factors should you consider?
So the first factor to consider, and this goes back to my work on 3X, explore, expand,
Exactly.
extract, which talks about the changing value of time. In the 3X world, I'll take a little detour and then I'll come back to your question. In the 3X world, early days of a project, time is important because you want to perform as many experiments as possible. You don't assume that you know where value is going to come from. But then one of those experiments is surprisingly successful. And now so this is explore, and now you're expanding fast. And now time becomes extremely valuable because as you grow, you discover the next bottleneck and you have to overcome that bottleneck, and then the next one comes, and the next one, and the next one. So time is very valuable there.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then
Exactly.
in the extract part, when growth becomes more predictable, time is less valuable. If you're at scale, you have a project, you'll spend $100 million and you'll get back $1 billion. If that takes 2 months more or less, just doesn't matter. I don't know what that gesture means in Pakistan or Egypt. In Italy, that means it doesn't matter. That was my
Yeah,
speech.
understand. Yes, I understand.
You have to be careful about these things. I've worked with Italians long enough.
Most of the gestures are same.
Okay, good. So time has different values in different parts of that curve. Um,
All right.
and so architecture has different values. So
Exactly.
one way to approach architecture is say, oh, we need to spend all this time before we start, so we get everything perfect. Well, except in that early days of the project, time is so precious because you
Exactly.
need to be performing many experiments in
Exactly.
order to find value. That's how you
Exactly.
survive that early part of the
That's
project. So those two goals clash very strongly. So my
exactly.
approach is to expect to invest in architecture throughout the life of the project. So
All
it
right.
in that there's a Newton-Raphson method for estimating the square root. It's an iterative method for estimating square roots, and it kind of doesn't matter where you start. And
Exactly.
architecture for me is the same. If you know that you're going to invest as you go along, it doesn't matter where you start. So you may as well do something
Exactly.
simple that lets you run
Exactly.
your first experiments right now, and
Exactly.
then move thoughtfully to the next thing. So
Exactly.
I watched this play out at Facebook, where from 2011 to 2017, I was there, and
Exactly.
Facebook grew enormously in that time. The architecture grew
Exactly.
enormously in that time, but there wasn't some grand plan at the beginning, and that's what we executed on. The architecture we ended up with was something we couldn't even have imagined at the beginning of that. So
Oh, that's good.
um,
That's nice.
the this style that I'm talking about, that I'm writing about now, I call it empirical software design, where there's the speculative style of design where you make a bunch of decisions as early as possible. And then there's the reactive style of design where
Exactly.
you wait until the last minute and then you think, oh, this is going to be a disaster. I
Exactly.
want to be someplace in the middle where it's empirical. I I do something, I look at the results, I adapt based on what I
Exactly.
actually
Exactly.
observe. So
Exactly.
uh, now the more tricks you have in your pockets, the better a job you
Yes.
can do as an architect. So if you know about event-based architectures, that's great.
Exactly.
Does it mean you should use them day one? Maybe, maybe not. Whatever gets your experiments running. But if you have that in your pocket and you know, okay, it's time to introduce event-based
Exactly.
some event sourcing to this
Exactly.
architecture.
Exactly.
Now I'm going to incorporate it a little at a time, a little at a time, a little at a time. And now we've transitioned to
Exactly.
events from a more imperative style, and without ever disrupting the delivery of new features. So
Exactly.
that's my take on that. And the upfront architects hate that because they want
Exactly.
control. But why would you make all those decisions at your moment of least knowledge and least skill? That's part that doesn't
Exactly.
make sense to
Exactly.
me. I got some
Exactly.
sunshine coming through here. But I also, the reactors say, well, but we have to get the next feature. We have to get the next feature.
Exactly.
Sometimes
Exactly.
yes, and sometimes no. So
Exactly. Exactly.
does that answer your
This,
question?
yes, exactly. This is this answered my question. So we should spend a lot of time and we should have some experience before starting the architecture, because that's not reversible. Like if you made a bad decision, that's gonna pay a lot to the company, to the people, to the organization, especially to the client. Exactly. So, um, Kent, if you came across a project which has no architecture, then what's your first approach in refactoring it? It has no
There,
architecture.
there's no, wait. There's no such thing. There's always some architecture. You you have some elements, they're related somehow. A request comes in, however that happens, answers go out, however that happens. Inside of that, there are elements, whether it's functions or services or objects, or somehow it all happens. So there's always some architecture. And the tidy first style suggests that you make an informed decision when you need to change how the system behaves. So I need a new answer, but changing the system is going to be hard. Then I need to think to myself, should I tidy first? And the answer is probably yes, but not too much. It's always tempting once you start to just keep going, but it's okay. You can wait and do the rest of the tidying later. So that's how I approach it. Okay, there's a system, it has some design, and that system doesn't just include the software, it includes the people who make the changes to the people who operate the software, the people who use the results of the software. They're part of the system too. So I want to be uh, both deliberate, thoughtful about what I do. I don't want to speculate because mistakes are expensive. I want to make small decisions and then make sure that the system as it evolves in a positive direction. Does that answer your question?
Yes, exactly. It answers my. So my next question is, Ken, that how the test-driven development increases the productivity of programmer in the developer's perspective, and the stability of the code, for example, which in turn reduces the stress on the programmer and the time they spent on the debugging, because whenever the feature comes, this is always stressing for the programmer. So if they follow the TDD, how it can increase their productivity as perspective of the programmer? I'm talking about the stress on the programmer.
Um, so I I don't accept the premise that a new feature is always going to be stressful for programmers. I think if that's true, you should treat that as an opportunity to improve development so that it doesn't feel like that anymore.
Exactly. Sometimes everything is going smooth, but client presents you with a new feature and you say, "Yo, today is 7th May. I want it by 17th May. Complete it. Otherwise, this is not good for us organization." Obviously, things are smooth, architecture is good, but you have to invest the time in that complex feature.
So there are organizations where if somebody says this feature needs to be done by May 17,
Exactly, exactly,
it
exactly,
it doesn't act they don't actually mean that. They mean I need some I need a reason that I won't get yelled at. I'm the manager and I need a reason I won't get yelled at on May 17th. And if the feature doesn't work, if it has
exactly,
errors, if it's clunky, if it's
exactly,
slow, if it's unreliable, I don't care. Now, nobody's going to come out and say that because that would be awful. But if you look
Exactly.
at how they behave, that's exactly how they behave, as if uh, in English we'd say plausible deniability.
Exactly.
I have an excuse. You can't yell at me. The feature's there. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, you wanted it to work. Oh, you should have said that. So, I think uh, I want to address those kinds of concerns, or like if that's the facts, then let's operate based on those facts. Um, as a programmer, I feel a lot of anxiety as I program still
Exactly.
after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And TDD for me is a relatively low cost, a relatively low side effect way for me not to feel anxious while I'm programming. When I'm not anxious, I'm more creative. I get along better with my colleagues.
Exactly.
I'm more
Exactly.
productive. So I want those things in my life.
Exactly.
So every time I write a test, it's like, oh God, what if this doesn't work? Oh,
Ex-
well, it doesn't work. Oh, well, let's make it work. Okay, and then we make it work. And I'm like, oh, what was I worried about? Sometimes I'll press the run button and I'll just be like, oh, does everything work? I press the run button, the tests all run. I think, huh. And then I'm still a little, so I just press it again. And it's green again, of course. Ah, okay. And then maybe one more time. Just one more time. Ah, oh, good.
That's what
Now
you
you need your
know.
test. You need your tests to run fast in order to do that and not be wasting time. But it's such a stress reliever for me,
Exactly.
that I think that pays for itself. All the debugging time that you don't have to go through. Now it's hard to account for that time. It's hard to say, well, where how show me how this pays off in dollars. Yeah, because of the defects that didn't happen, because of the times I didn't have to work on the weekend, so I was fresh and productive on Monday, because our customers didn't leave us quietly because there were so many bugs in the code. It's really hard to count those moments in dollars, but if you step back and you think, as a whole system, what's creating more value, being able to count on your programmers can be huge. Now, people aren't used to it. Number one,
Exactly.
people
Exactly.
who rely on programmers aren't used to being able to count on programmers. Programmers, so a lot of the resistance I see to TDD, if we dig and dig and dig, people say, TDD is a bunch of garbage. I said, well, are you responsible for the quality of your code? And the answer,
Yes.
nobody's just going to say
Yes.
yes. But the answer,
Yes.
if you dig, they're like, no, that's
Yes.
QA's problem. It's not my problem. As soon as this gesture happens, you're in trouble. This is somebody saying, I'm not responsible.
You have to be
Um,
responsible.
I-
Exactly.
well, apparently you don't have to, but
Exactly.
there's a lot of benefits to being responsible.
Exactly.
If you
Exactly.
say it works, it really works. And if it doesn't work, you're going to pay the cost of it. That's what
Exactly.
responsibility is.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
TDD, whether you TDD or not, I don't care, but be responsible for the quality of your work because it matters to other people.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Kent, what advice do you have for the developers who are very new to Agile and very new to TDD, and they want to start implementing those practices in their work? And how should teams adopt Agile and TDD practices to suit their specific project requirements and constraints? So, basically, what's your advice in that? Who are
So as
new
an
to this?
individual, yeah, as an individual, you should just be able to experiment on some stuff. You might want to try on toy
Exactly.
problems or side projects first. Um, be prepared to do the same task multiple times. This is something that
Exactly.
everybody all of the really great engineers, and I've had the good fortune to work with some amazing engineers in my career. The really good ones all would do the same task over multiple times. Now I do it maybe more than they do, which is I'm a little bit off, but I'll implement the same thing 5 or 6 times. And each time I try it a little different. In TDD, you start out with a list of scenario. Yeah, this needs to work and this needs to work and this. So, well, which one should I do first?
Exactly.
I don't know. Let me start with this one first, and then this one, and then this one. Oh, well, throw that away. What if I started with this one? How's it going to come out different? I don't know. Let's just try it. Okay, what if I did this? What if I split these up into more scenarios? What if I only did 2 scenarios? Can I like you can play with that, and by going over it the second, third, fourth, fifth times, you get rid of the can I possibly do this? That's just gone. Now you're actually paying attention to, what are all the variations? And how would I know which variation do I want to try? Um,
Exactly.
that's the way
Exactly.
you maximize. That's a strategy. That's the way I maximize learning, is by doing things over and over. A lot of companies don't see that learning is their business, that they want programmers to be learning as much as possible. Whereas I think that's if you want really productive programmers, you ignore productivity and you maximize learning. And
Exactly.
then, of course, if you learn
Exactly.
something and you implement something, a piece of that to try out this thing that you learned, of course, you're going to get stuff out of that. But
Exactly.
as a manager, it's less like a mass production line where you're counting the cars that come out, and you're paying more attention to how's this whole production line set up? And if we
Exactly.
switch this and move that over and did this and change this
Exactly.
supplier,
Mm-hmm.
if you try those
Mm-hmm.
experiments, you're going to get more cars coming out than if
Exactly.
you just screw the screws in
Exactly.
faster.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. So, Kent, I'm really blessed to work in a company where they put so much focus on the employees' growth. So they value the work, but at the same time, they value on the programmer, their personal growth, their professional growth. And I think this is very much necessary. Their communication skills. So companies should invest on their programmers as well. So, because there is so much to learn every day, we can't say that I'm the master of one thing because every day technology is evolving. So, the income if company is investing on you, then you are really blessed to be working in this company.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unusual, which is sad. It's
Yes,
I mean, it's a waste of human potential. You know,
exactly,
in 3 billion seconds is 92 years. And every second, another one of our seconds goes away and it'll never come back.
never
Never.
come back.
And wasting any of those when you don't have to is it's it's irrecoverable. And squeezing somebody and telling somebody they're a bad person because they didn't stay overnight, and it's just a waste of those seconds. It's a waste of the seconds for the person with the finger, because they could be doing something better
Exactly,
with their life. It's a waste
E-
of
e-
the seconds of the person who's getting
e-
shaken at. It's
exactly,
like
exactly,
if you're so smart, you program it.
exactly, exactly,
If this is easy, then why are you paying me to do it? That makes no sense.
exactly,
I,
exactly,
I, it's pulling somebody by helping them find purpose is so much more powerful than
exactly,
pushing because you're afraid.
exactly,
So I want to find organizations and friends and communities that are more focused on pulling than pushing.
exactly, exactly, exactly. So, Kent, what metrics do you recommend for the teams to use to measure the effectiveness of their agile and their TDD practices? What
I
metrics you could use to measure?
I like that the way you phrase the question. What metrics can teams use?
Exactly.
When metrics are used to compare people, here's a person with power. I'm going to compare you as a programmer with me as a programmer, with this other, somebody else as a programmer. We're all going to cheat. We
Exactly.
should all cheat. And then the
Exactly.
metrics don't mean anything. And then we're just
Exactly.
engaged in this wasteful game. If a team wants to understand its own operation, or if I as a programmer want to understand my own operation, I think
Exactly.
metrics are wonderful. So in the TDD book, the test driven development book, I I had an example in there of
Exactly.
developing. I think I did the money example, and then I did a J unit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They
And then I
exactly.
also recorded the timestamps of my test runs to see, well, how long is it between times that I run tests?
Exactly.
That seemed it was an interesting exercise. Um, there's some distribution to the gaps between test runs. There are I can look at which tests failed most often. I can look at
Mm-hmm.
runtime for tests. Um, and then I can understand myself a little bit better so that the next time I need to
Exactly.
program, I'm in a better position.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
teams should gather the information that they want to get. Individuals should gather the information that they want to gather to improve. Teams
Exactly.
should gather the information that they want to gather in order to
Exactly.
improve, but
Exactly.
together, not as a comparison. As soon as it's a
Exactly.
comparison, it's a game, and people are going
Exactly.
to play the game in a way that ruins the information value of the numbers. And that's
Exactly.
frustrating. I understand that it's frustrating if the salesperson says, "Hey, if we hire 3 more salespeople, experience shows that we're going to get $3 million in sales because we each salesperson sells $1 million, more or less."
Exactly.
And then
Exactly.
the CFO looks at that and says, "Okay, well, if we hire 3 new programmers, what are we going to get? We'll go faster. The architecture will get like we, but you can't say
Exactly.
what 3 more programmers are going to do. So, and I understand that it's frustrating, and that is the job. It is an intangible. The best that we can do is say some metric like sales per programmer, and then you think, well, but a lot of other factors go into sales per programmer than how well they program. Yeah, absolutely. That's the way the whole business works.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
um, deploys per day.
Exactly.
Here's the metric. This one's a little complicated, and I haven't gotten anybody to actually really try it. But just hear me out. I've been pushing on this for a while, and I don't know why it's a bad idea. When I start writing some code, the
Right.
company is now spending money,
Exactly.
and that money is it's an investment. We expect to get some payoff someday for it.
Exactly.
But let's start a clock. So I just spent $1 writing code, and
Exactly.
and then another dollar and another dollar and another dollar. So how many dollar minutes do we have? We have 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1. What if we looked at that across the whole organization, engineering organization, where we said, how many dollar days is there of code that has been invested in and isn't giving us any return? So once
Exactly.
you deploy and people actually use it, then the clock stops. But I want to know,
Exactly.
what's that total? How many? It's kind of like a float in finance where
Exactly.
money's gone out, but it hasn't come back in yet.
Yes.
Um, what's the magnitude of that? And how do we reduce that by 20%? So if we just got a rough number and said, all right, well, it seems like across our whole organization, we have $4 million days of code that we've invested in that hasn't started making us money. How can we get that to
Exactly.
3 million? Okay, what are the bottlenecks? Oh, well, we'd have to change this and the planning process, blah, and the integration pipeline and the deployment pipeline. And so just start working on those things to keep that number from certainly from growing and to see if you could
Exactly.
shrink it. What that means is
Exactly.
that there's more feedback in the system,
Yes.
and it's the value we create is the positive value we create minus the mistakes that we make.
Exactly.
So if you want to create more value, either you can create more top line value or we can reduce the cost of the mistakes. And how long the mistakes persist is a big part of the cost of the mistake. So that's
Exactly.
a big metric. As I said, I proposed this, I don't know, 20 years ago, and nobody's actually done a serious job of trying it, but it still makes sense to me.
Really can't. If I talk about Pakistan, it's my fourth company, and literally things are changing here as well. Like the things you are proposing, companies are more, investing on the programmers, on their growth, on their potential. They are moving more toward people-centric organization rather than there being a boss coming out with a stick and saying that it should be done before night or you should spend some extra hours. So I think things are changing, progressing with time. Companies are really getting serious about these things, because if you don't work this way, then the cost of the mistakes that are done under pressure are going to be huge. So I think the companies are coming towards this way, and people are following your model. We are also following this TDD, even though in my previous companies this practice was not so common. But in our company, yep, teams are following this test driven development. I was really happy that this company follows the TDD practices, because it gives you the better code confidence, the better code quality. You're not embarrassed in the front of client especially.
Hmm.
So this is so I think you answered my most of the questions that my audience wanted to ask from you. And I'm really thankful, and I still don't believe that I am talking to you. And I had the questions in my mind from past few months, and I understand that your time is really precious, and I have to just wind up in next few minutes. So I'm really thankful. And with talking to you, I got more insight of this, because you had a great experience. You had worked with big organizations, and you have worked with different teams and different organizations that are basically driving the IT world in whole IT stuff in the whole world. So we can't get the better insights living in a small world or in the small company. So if we talk to you, then we can get insights of how things should be, how we should learn from your experience, and how we could be progressive. Uh, just we don't make mistakes if we learn from the experience of our big technical persons.
Well, you'll make new mistakes.
Yes, yes, yes,
Did
exactly. Because if you are eager to learn from other guys' experiences who were successful, who were done really something for the world, so you have to follow them. Otherwise, you are going to be at the same place. At the end, it just destroys your reputation in front of client if you don't follow these models that the people have worked immensely from past 40 years, from 50 years.
Well, development can be much better than it is. I have
Exactly,
people
exactly.
come up to me and they say, "Oh, from 2003 to 2005, I was on an extreme programming team, and it was the highlight of my career. It was fantastic. We loved each other. We produced tons of value for our customer. It was just wonderful." And when I hear stories like that, I cry. The first time somebody came up and told me that, I was in Johannesburg, and I literally just burst into tears. 2005, and it hasn't happened in the last 19 years. And you're kind of you're sad about that, but you're resigned. let's make that experience of development the normal experience.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
we can do it, and if we do it, the world gets more value. We
Exactly.
have better lives as geeks, and it's entirely possible. None of this is like you need a PhD in mathematics to do this. It's entirely possible to do this. So that I'm glad to hear that Pakistan is leading the way in that.
Exactly.
I hope to see more and
Especially
more like
especially
this.
Kent, my company DPL, it's really a game changer in the country. They're more moving more towards agile and more towards people growth and people centric organization. So I hope that in the rest of the world, in the Pakistan as well, people start following these models to be more progressive, to get more values. So, Kent, my last question is this: have you worked in a project where client was on your head and they gave you so much stress, and you didn't, there was more challenging for you to, uh, be go through this complex environment or the complex project where you can get the panic attacks or anxiety attacks, or how to handle these things? So, what was your experience in that in the last few minutes, if you could state that?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about which story I want to tell you, not whether
Oh,
I've
oh
been
my
in.
God! It means you have gone through many.
Yes, I've gone through many, and that's why I know how to set boundaries is because I did it used
Exactly.
to be able to say,
No.
you need this in 3 months, and it's going to take me 6 months. That's like that part of it. The fact that you want this bundle of work in this amount of time is not my problem. It is my problem if we take a step back and say, okay, the company needs, our customers need, and there is time pressure. But that can be the start of a conversation. But I was the most recent team that I managed. I was demanded of, well, what's the when are you going to be finished with what? Well, we don't know exactly, but when are you going to be finished? I said, I'm not going to answer that question.
Exactly.
Every 2 weeks we had that conversation for 12 weeks. Okay, okay, I understand, but just give me a date. No, I'm not going to give you a date. If I gave you a date, you have a stick to hit my team.
Exactly.
And I'm just not going to do it. I ended up with arthritis, eczema, my
Exactly.
skin,
Exactly.
migraine headaches, and
Exactly.
I eventually had to quit. So that's how I handle it. Not too well, apparently.
That's really good to know because in my experience, I have been going through the same thing over and over. So much pressure, so much things, so much panic kind of things. At the end, it's better to focus on your health afterwards. Then what you can't handle those people. This is their way of mind. This is a power structure.
Right.
They order something in the morning and they want it by the night.
Sure. And I understand that. I can have
Exactly.
compassion for the person
Exactly.
making that
Exactly.
request. I understand that you're in a hurry. I understand that your incentives are aligned with you. The only thing that feels good is you getting this instantly. But if I can't accomplish that, I can't accomplish that. So
Exactly.
then what? Are we going to are you going to stand way over there and yell at me, and I'm going to stand way over here and fold my arms?
Exactly.
Or are we going to take a breath, just like we did at the beginning, Maria? Are we going to take a breath
Yes.
and walk towards each other and say, all right, well, what would you like to see first?
Exactly.
Oh, well, but I don't see how it seems like it's all one big lump. All right, I understand that. But if we just did a command line interface, would that be okay? If we just had a spreadsheet macro just for this little part of the calculation, is that better?
Exactly.
Well, that's better, but I want everything. I understand, but is that something? Have we delivered some value, and are we going to get some feedback? Yes. Okay.
Exactly.
Let's do
Exactly.
that. So even if that's a little messy from an engineering standpoint, I would much rather be standing together with the people who have
Exactly.
the needs.
Exactly.
and talking creatively about how we can get their needs met.
Exactly.
That's the essence of extreme programming, TDD, patterns,